all that stuff. So yeah, tell me a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get started.
Sure. My name is Chidi and I am a full stack developer. Um, 3 years ago, I went to boot camp. I went to Grace Hopper at Full Stack Academy, and shortly after graduating, I got my first role, and that came to an end last year. Unfortunately, I was laid off, and now I'm just looking for an opportunity, new, and my next opportunity, basically. So
Nice.
that's
Okay.
what brings us here.
That sounds good. So okay, so it looks like you wanted to do a mock technical interview today. So we can kind of get into interview mode, or we can do um
Yeah.
I don't know, what exactly would you like to
Because I
accomplish today?
remember when we discussed it, right? Like
Yeah.
initially I was of the mind I was going to do a mock technical, but upon discussing my needs, it's going to be more like a career coaching session with an
Okay.
emphasis on how to prepare for like the technical and how to more efficiently study.
Got you. Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. So yeah, I guess from I think from what you said in the description, you were talking about how you use Algo Expert
Yeah.
and you have trouble with mock technical interviews. So or with general technical interviews. So I guess how much trouble have you been having? Like is it like how many have you done? How many have you passed or failed? Like what are the numbers around that? Just so I can, you know.
So it's, I want to say like I've done like maybe three algo
Okay.
style interviews and
Three real technical interviews.
algo style, yeah.
Algo style.
I
Okay,
had
algo style.
like
I didn't.
other like more domain knowledge or like building something, but like algo style in particular, I
Yeah.
have had like about three.
Okay.
Yeah.
And all three of them, you feel like you bombed them,
No,
or you were kind
it's
of
like
sort of there?
I just felt unprepared. Like I
Okay.
felt like it was something I could do if I just were to prepare efficiently.
Yeah.
And like, that's why I took some time to actually take a course because like
Right.
I was just kind of like brute forcing everything for
Right.
a while.
Right.
And it's just like I took a course to
Which
learn
isn't
about
the worst, but
algorithms.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. So then now I have a better conception of like trade-offs, like runtime,
Hmm.
time and space complexity and things like that. Because I was coming up from the point of like, you just got to solve the problem. But it's
Hmm.
like, no, like you got to, not only do you want to solve the problem, you have to like know probably multiple ways to solve the problem and be able to articulate what the trade-offs are. And I'm just
Hmm.
like, damn, this just got harder.
Right.
You know what I mean?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's big. Yeah, I think with like a lot of those big tech companies, they don't only want to see you solve the problem, they want to see you optimize the like optimize whatever initial solution you come up with, so that brute force, and then come up with a better solution. Better meaning, time complexity wise, space complexity wise, or even just how the code style looks. So there's a bunch of different examples with that. But I guess maybe I could just speak about how I kind of go about how I approach these interviews.
Yeah.
So
I see
for
you've been pretty successful in them for sure. So I
oh, I
wanted
mean
you.
that's how it appears, but I've had my trials and tribulations for sure. One thing I tell a lot of people is that I've never worked at a company full time that didn't reject me in the past. So with Bloomberg, they turned me down for their when I first graduated from college. They turned me down last year. No, not last year, 2 years ago, when I was looking to leave Etsy. Same with Amazon, they turned me down back in college. Etsy, same thing, turned me down back in college. So it's just like over time, I guess you kind of get better, but then it's also a lot of it is circumstances. At the time when I interviewed at Amazon, I was interviewing the entire year and I was bombing interviews the entire year. But then
Mm,
at the end of the year, that's when I was like, okay, now I'm starting to feel strong. I,
yeah.
had Microsoft, had Amazon, and both those interviews, I just did really well on those. Same thing with Bloomberg. Like I had, bombed a couple interviews before that. And then by the time I got to Bloomberg, I was just feeling really strong. So, but I guess my approach when I'm trying to prepare for these interviews, it first of all, it starts with well, I guess rewind. I have a background in computer science. I went to Brooklyn College, studied computer science. So I kind of know the general topics that they're going to cover, even if I don't know the details about it necessarily. So for example, let's say something related to sorting comes up, right? And they're like, oh, we need to sort this thing and then do something with it. I know the foundations of, like, I remember studying these different sorting algorithms, bubble sort, merge sort, quick sort, all that stuff. But do I know the exact details of it? No, not at all. But some companies might ask you that. Like, they might want you to know, give us, like, what are the details of a merge sort or a quick sort? So
Mm,
I try to at least go back. I probably have code on my repos somewhere where I just try to just understand the fundamentals first. So I might just go back, look up one or two sorting algorithms, one or two searching algorithms, like binary search, all that stuff. Then I would go like each of the main data structures. So I'd go, arrays and lists, arrays, linked lists, stacks, queues, dictionary slash hash maps, and then so yeah, those are the main data structures. Then I'll kind of look, oh, and then graphs, of course, graphs, you can't forget graphs.
yeah,
Then I would, so I would look at, what's the implementation of all these different data structures, like, because most of the programming libraries we use, they
yeah,
implement them for us.
yeah,
But in like a computer science program, we we focus more on, if you look at pretty much any curriculum, they focus more on the implementation of them first before trying to start using them in one of these programming libraries. So oftentimes your first assignments in one of these data structures classes or algorithms classes is to first build out the data structure that you're going to use. So how would you build a stack using native arrays in Java or C++? How would you build a queue? Blah, blah, blah. So I would first review that stuff.
okay,
And it might be implementing it myself, or it might just be looking at the code, depending on, the context of, do I have time, just my life in general, and kind of playing with that.
and if I'm looking down, it's because I'm taking notes.
Yeah, yeah, no worries. So yeah, after reviewing just the initial data structures, um, popular algorithms, right? Oh, I forgot trees as well
Yes,
in that
okay,
list.
please, of course, yeah,
Yeah, trees is in that as well. But yeah, after that, then I'll start looking into popular algorithms. I usually start with graphs and trees because those are the ones that I have the most trouble with. So I'll start with for graphs, the two main ones that you need to know: breadth first search, depth first search, and know the trade-offs between them, the running time, time complexity, all that stuff. Then I would go into the tree stuff, depth first search, breadth first search, but it's basically the traversals, right? And knowing the different traversals, knowing the differences between them, all stuff that would be covered in like a computer science curriculum.
yeah,
And then kind of go through all of them. Then I might go into, depending on the company, so like a Google or Facebook and maybe an Amazon, like basically Fang or Mang or whatever.
mm,
I might go in a little bit more in detail on things like dynamic programming,
mm,
um, what else is there? Just, like very big topics that, like, like basically the hard topics. Like every computer science students is like, oh, I really don't want to, get this type of problem. For the Googles and the Amazons and all that stuff, I might look into that just to review. So you know, after that review session where I'm just kind of going over those fundamentals, just so I'm like a little bit aware of it, then I would start getting into doing leak code problems. And I might do like a couple of, like one or two a day. Just, depending on, of course, everything is in the context of what your schedule looks like.
sure,
So, I might try to do, like, I might have a goal to do, two a day, but then in reality, it turns out to be maybe one a day. And I just read the problem and read the solution, kind of try to understand it and then move on. Right. But of course, everything is balanced. You try as much as you can. And
mm,
and also I would say take this with a grain of salt because I've always been employed when trying to look for a job, like employed or in school.
Yeah.
It's a little bit different. If I wasn't employed, I might just only focus on that. If I, if I'm like my money life situation is, on the more stable side. But this is, take it with a grain of salt. I'm not trying to say this will work for everybody
Yeah.
necessarily. Um, and then
Kind
yeah,
of
so
like what
I'm sorry. Yeah.
I'm saying, but it's kind of like what worked for you at the time.
Yeah, exactly. What works
Mhm.
for me at the time. And of course, and like I already know that there are people out there who do way more prep than I do. I
Mhm.
remember when I was in college, I was I was doing my interviews and all that stuff. I had internship experience. So I was like, okay, I have this internship that gave me a return offer, but I want to see what else I can get. But
Mhm.
and I was interviewing all the time, all that stuff. I would fail a whole lot of interviews, but I would, I was passing some. But I remember there was this girl in my class, and she was just super studious, right? She
Mhm.
didn't interview nearly as much as I did, but she got her one Google interview, and she just prepared to, prepared
Yeah.
like crazy for that specific interview. So she was doing leak code all the time. Like if you look on like Blind and all the forums and all that, they're like, oh, you have to do 200 leak code. That
100. It's like,
all that stuff, which I think there's some merit to it because if you get that interview from that company that you specifically want, Google, like one of those top companies that many people seem to want, then
mhm.
it might be worth it to just say, I'm dropping everything and I'm only gonna focus on that and just leak code every single day, 10 problems a day, something like that. I just
Mhm.
didn't necessarily have the time for it. But I think both approaches could work because with that girl that I mentioned that was in that computer science class in college, she interviewed at Google and she got it on the first try. And and that worked for her. I did, and I have not passed the Google interview, so I can't say the same for myself. So maybe that approach might work a little bit better, where
Mhm.
she's just grinding on the leak code problems, doing the prop. And of course, when you're doing the problem,
Mhm.
I should say this.
Yes, when you're
When
doing
yeah,
this.
when you're doing the problem, right? If you're just doing it by yourself,
Yeah.
so let's talk about both instances, right?
Yes.
Doing a problem by yourself versus with someone else. So if you're doing it by yourself, which is probably what you're mostly going to be doing, similar to
Definitely.
like college or class or whatever, you're gonna most of your studying is gonna happen by yourself.
Yeah.
What I like to do is kind of similar to like, let's say if you ever took like calculus or trig or something like
Mhm.
that when you were in high school or college.
Mhm.
I would try to, of course, read the problem, try to, understand it, try the problem yourself without having to go to, any resources, and then
Yes.
try until you're just stuck. And then when you're stuck, try to look at the answer or look at, a past question that is something similar, look at
Yeah.
some resources to help you answer it, and then see, okay, what did I learn from, like, do I understand the problem? What were they trying to get me to understand? Where was the lack in knowledge? Did I
Mhm.
not know the Pythagorean theorem? Did I not know that you could you know get the running time of a map by doing, did I not apply dynamic programming? Did I not try to save this value to be reused later on and understand why you couldn't, why you didn't, get to that solution without
Um,
looking at the answer? And
like
then
what you're asking yourself basically, like,
mhm,
what is it that if I had known would have helped me solve this problem?
exactly.
Okay.
And
Okay.
then the step further, which I might not always do, but the step further, which is probably what you should do, is
Mhm.
actually write the solution your own on your own this time. So
Okay.
you read the problem, you tried it yourself, then you saw the solution, read the solution, understood the solution, all that stuff. Now you
Mhm.
do the problem again, and now you should get it right this time. So
Okay. So
and
can I
if you
tell
do
you?
that, yeah. Or
Okay.
last part, if you do that every time, so I would recommend, like, if you're studying by yourself, doing leak codes by yourself, if you do one of those and you do each of those steps by
Yeah.
yourself, like there's no way that you don't improve with your leak coding
I,
and algorithm solving, problem solving abilities. And that's
Okay.
with any subject. Like I did this in calculus, I did this in like all these math classes. It works.
That's okay. I love that because like I don't know. I feel like I'm someone who really struggles with growth mindset. It's like if it doesn't come to me like right away, like I start to get really down about it and like
Mm-hmm.
kind of depressed about it. And it's like this is the limit to what I can know. I always have this like clearly I can't go further. How am I ever going to get to this point? Because it's so difficult. But I am learning like in this industry you cannot have like you really it's such a hindrance to your progress. So what I've been doing lately, and you can maybe help me kind of debug this process, and it's kind of similar to maybe what you described in that like for instance like you go like well, I'll go expert they have like videos they have to go through the conceptual overview and then they'll have solutions provided for each problem.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll do like I'll devote like a good amount of time to a problem. Like I'll read it, I'll try and understand it, go through like some examples in my head to kind of pseudocode it out, and then like
Mm-hmm.
start solving the problem.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm able to brute force it, then I will, and then look at the solution. But if I'm not, it gets stuck, then I will just like I'll give myself like 20-25 minutes to make some good progress. And if I get stuck, I'm not able to go further, I will look at the conceptual overview, the video, and go through like the different solutions, the trade-offs between those solutions. And while I'm doing this, I'm writing like my notes. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm making notes. Um
You're
and
writing you're writing pen on paper.
yes, I'm writing on my like my digital tablet. And
Okay.
so my digital notepad rather. So I take all the notes for that one problem, everything, and then like I then write the solution by hand. And then after which I'll like go back maybe like an hour later or so and then try to implement the problem, try to implement the solution on the platform at that point, or I'll do that immediately. And then upon implementing the solution and passing all the test cases, I will move on to the next problem. So I just kind of do that. And my paranoia is like, okay, though I'm able to implement the solution eventually after looking at the conceptual overview and solutions, it's like, should I review them the following day? Like, should I just keep moving? Like, and then
Oh
just,
yeah.
like hope that like I'm just absorbing the material as it goes on. Like, how
Mm-hmm.
often do I review? Because I get really paranoid that things I learned, I will no longer know in
Right.
short order. So that tends to present an issue as well.
Right. That makes sense. So I guess I'll answer your question. So there's 2 points I wanted to bring up: the reviewing, and
Mm-hmm.
then when you're initially solving the problem.
Mm-hmm.
For reviewing the problem, so I might not do that just because of time constraints and all that. And
Sure.
I'm usually employed or in school or whatever. Like all the times that I've interviewed in the past, I had something else that took up most of my time.
Yeah.
But if it was like, so I kind of think about it like if it was a class, which is how most of these companies, at least like I know Google, for example, they kind of have this standard of an academic approach to
Mm-hmm.
software engineering, which is why a lot of the people that they hire come from college programs, where they so in terms of reviewing, I think it is a good idea to review the problem a day later, a couple days later. And you could even think about it as like chapters where, okay, this chapter, maybe the next, 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I'm focused on trees. And you're doing these problems. Maybe at the end of the week, you review all the problems that you did that week and see, okay, can I still do them again? Just trying to, and I think I raised this example with someone before. Do you remember like in like middle school, elementary school, where
Mm-hmm.
you would get in trouble and they would make you write, oh, I will not talk in class. I will not talk in class. I will not talk in class.
Yes.
Like they would have you write that 50 times on the board. I think it's kind of similar with these programming interviews, where the more times you write it, the more it's gonna stick in your brain, and that's with different problems, but also with the same problem. So I remember that okay, I think it was before the Amazon interview. There was one problem that I was using because I was like really having trouble with I think it was dynamic programming. And there
Mhm.
was one problem that I just did all the time, right? Like maybe once a week I might look at this problem. I think it was like trapping rainwater, right? You might have seen it. It's like basically like you're looking at a graph or like an array, and then each day
Right.
has some rainwater, and then you're trying to see. So it's something like that. I don't remember the exact details of it, but I would do this problem all the time to the point that like I knew it like the back of my hand. And I focused on this particular problem because I knew it was one of the weak points that I had. And
Mhm.
yeah, so reviewing is super valuable.
Okay.
Repetition, and you said something about oh yeah, when you're initially doing the problem, right? I try to always have at least the brute force solution before I even get to the look at the real solution, right?
Mhm.
Because and I feel like there's not many problems that you can't get at least a brute force solution. Even if it's a crazy solution, like I would never write this in code, you could still try to get that brute force solution.
Mhm.
Because oftentimes these problems are like they're like actual problems that like you could like so you could talk to someone who doesn't know how to program, and they could think about it, and you give them an example, they could tell you the answer to that example. For
Yeah.
example, like the trapping rainwater, or iterating through a list and finding the biggest number, or something like that. Like they could theoretically just be like, okay, I would look in through each of these numbers and I'll choose that one. So I
Yeah.
would say like try to make it a goal that with whatever problem you come across, you at least get a brute force solution.
Okay.
You might not be able to write it in code, but at least able to speak, write down just
Okay.
the ideas of what that brute force solution would be, and then get the running time for it, and at least know why it's not the best, it's not the most optimal, whether it takes too much space. Maybe they say, oh, we have a list of countries and we need to figure out which one has the most da 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 da. And you're saying, oh, I'm gonna go to each country and see what it does. Well, maybe
Yeah.
that's not the best way to do it, but at least you have that. That is a solution, right? It is a answer to your problem. And then try to iterate from there. And then if you can't iterate from there, that's when you go to the you look at the answer or whatever. And then you go back, review until you get it.
Okay, that's solid advice. I like that you said to at least try and get a brute force solution, even if it's like
Hmm.
pseudo coded, like for some parts of it is pseudo coded, at least have like some sort of algorithmic way in order to arrive at the solution.
Hmm.
So I'm gonna start implementing that. Another thing I'm gonna start implementing is um, maybe having like like a review day,
Hmm.
like I can study all the time because I'm unemployed. So maybe Friday could be like a day in which I like review everything I've done that week, to see what I really have retained. Or even if it's like an hour to review what I've done the previous day. So definitely making time for that review aspect consistently.
Yeah. And
Um,
is there I guess okay, yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Yeah.
yeah.
Were you gonna say something else?
No, I was just gonna say like, so I think like just my formula is decent right now, but like I think it could definitely be better in having some better habits, like not being afraid to like kind of stick with the problem. Also knowing that trusting that it will get better as I'm consistently at it and not like getting bummed out if like I'm not getting to the solution or optimal solution right away. Because I
Hmm.
think like that, again, like that fixed mindset tends to hurt
Hmm.
me in the end. And I like what you said about thinking of it as like school and chapters.
Yes.
That will help me um, a little better in not taking it as like personally.
Oh
Because I
yeah,
know,
you definitely can't take it personally. Like if I were to tell you the amount of like if anyone who knows me around the time of college,
Mhm.
like when I was my senior year of college, I was like just interviewing like at every single company you could probably think of. I probably interviewed there, like going to San Francisco, going to Ohio, going to Utah, going to Texas, going to like trying to, and I failed a whole lot of interviews, but I also passed a lot of interviews. So it's like, but I only got to that stage where I was passing a lot of interviews after all the failures that I had. So it's making sure you keep your spirits up is huge because I have friends, I know people in the tech industry and oh, I need to touch on this, the group when you're studying as a part of a group. But when I'm working with, other people that I know in the tech world where they're trying to maybe leave their company. I remember when I was working at Etsy, which is like 2 years ago, I was
Mhm.
looking at potentially leaving and we would have like a study group where we would do a problem every day.
Mhm.
And I and then eventually some people kind of just like they did a couple interviews, they had a bad experience with a company, they didn't get some feedback, they thought they did well but didn't get some feedback, and they were like, yo, like F this, I'm not doing this anymore,
Yes.
like I'm gonna enjoy life or whatever. And which is not necessarily bad, but in terms of achieving that goal of potentially switching to a different company, they weren't necessarily able to do it because they just gave up. But I mean, in my opinion, that's probably when they're their strongest. At that point, right before they give up, like they're probably their best at interviewing. And if they just keep going, they'll just continue getting better. Because if you let's say I tried to interview right now at maybe a company that I've worked at, like it's if Bloomberg were to interview me right now, or Amazon were to interview, or Etsy, or any of these companies I've interviewed at right now at this exact moment, I probably would fail, right? Because I'm not really prepared, like I'm not, like loose, lubricated right now.
Mhm.
But if I'm preparing, 6 months, in 6 months, for sure, I think I have a solid chance. So it's definitely repetition. It's definitely sticking in there, perseverance. And let me touch on the
The
when you're
group.
studying as a part of a group. How often do you do that?
I don't have a group, unfortunately,
Okay.
but um, I do occasionally mock with some people.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not saying that you have to. It's
Mhm.
probably my best studying is done by myself, but if you do study as a part of a group, like kind of like if you're in a college class or high school class, like there can be value in, let's say, someone just explaining it to you as opposed to you reading it,
Mhm.
and or if let's say they're maybe a little bit weaker in said topic and you can explain it to them, that reinforces your own understanding of it.
I'm
So
very
it can be super helpful. But one thing I would say, if you're studying in a group, make sure you guys, everyone has time to at least read the problem without interruptions. So when we would study as a group, we would have like a Discord chat and we would have someone sharing their screen. We
mm,
would spend like maybe 5 minutes just reading the problem, coming up with an initial solution, like a brute force solution.
mhm,
And then after we come up with that brute force solution, after that 5 minutes or so, we talk about it for like 2 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or whatever. We
mhm,
come to consensus, maybe where there's a little bit of debate going back and forth about, oh, I think this one works, oh, what's the running time, how this exactly works, yada yada yada.
mhm,
And then after the 5 10 minutes, then we take another 10 15 minutes to individually code our own solutions, and then
mhm.
afterwards we'd like share them and talk it out. So I think that's a pretty good approach because it allows you to, one, at least have that collaboration, but two, think about the problem for yourself, not just having one person think about the problem and then everyone just kind of rides that coattail. Does that make sense?
No, that does make sense. And I think that's
Yeah,
a great strategy. No, I love that. Like, I think you gave really solid advice. And, one of the biggest takeaways is really just trusting that with enough repetition and like a good strategy going into it, like something will come of it,
for
something,
sure.
you know? and the failure and like failures are just like you can't sweat it too much. Like one failure can mean like the next one will be a success. So I like that. And I'm working to have that growth mindset throughout this interview process.
For sure. I did want to share because I was thinking that this was going to be a mock technical interview, so I wanted to just share what I was going to kind of go through with you, just for your own context, right?
Mhm.
So I wrote this article, the Fame Technical Interview. I think you may have
Yeah,
read this already,
yeah,
but the problems I reference in this are this problem twosome, which is the
yeah.
number one, the first problem on Leak Code. It's an easy one, and
Mhm.
then the this problem threesome, which is it builds off of the previous one twosome.
Yes.
And so what I was going to do, ask you the question. I had it in a doc right here, and we were just gonna go through the question, and then I have a very simple example. So here's what I would have been looking to see from you. If for you to, for me to say, oh, she's a great candidate, we need to have her, I would have been looking to see a, for one, do you ask any follow-up questions? Like, what about negative numbers? What about just different follow-up questions about the overall problem? Given
Yeah.
an array of integers, nums, and an integer target, return indices of the two numbers such that they add up to target. What about negative numbers? What about how large can the array be? How small can it be? What are the different edge cases? So I would have been looking for you to ask me some of those questions. Then I would have looked for you to, this example isn't really the most sufficient, right? Maybe you come up with your own example that has maybe 8 or 9 values in that input. And then you try to work through the problem like that manually, kind of like you were saying you would do on your own.
Mhm.
Manually work through the problem, write it down, talking out loud the entire time. Um, then I would be looking for you to so you walk it out. Then I would maybe be looking for you to maybe jot down some notes on your brute force approach, right? Your brute
Mhm.
force approach, maybe you come up with the time complexity, space complexity, and then you tell me, okay, this is what I think. Maybe your brute force is two loops that iterate through the
Mhm.
entire array, right?
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay. I think this can work, but maybe I think I can potentially do better. And then you start thinking again, okay, well, I noticed that, we already know this, and you try to figure out why is it that you could do better, right? Are
Right.
you doing the same calculation multiple times? Are you unnecessarily going through the loop, yada yada yada? And then
Mhm.
you come up with another approach. And then you talk through that one, you maybe write some pseudocode, and then before you start coding, you ask me, "Oh, Chuma, is it okay if I start coding?" I'm like, yeah, I think this is a solid approach. You can
Yeah.
start coding it now. Um, all the while, maybe I give you a hint. If I see you're stuck, I might give you a hint. And if I give you a hint, are you listening to my hint? Or do you
Yeah.
kind of just ignore my hint or and move on? So boom, you start coding. I'm like watching you, I'm watching how you name your variables, how you do this, how you do that. But really, I'm like, do you write the code effectively? Or and I think of it as like a pair programming session, right? Like if I was pair programming with you, am I understanding what you're doing while you're programming, or am I just kind of lost and looking at my phone while you're doing the program?
Yeah. Fair.
Um, After that, I'd be looking for time complexity, space complexity. Why is this solution, in your opinion, better than the last solution? Then
Mhm.
I might be looking for um yeah. Can we do even better than that? No. Why can't we do better than that?
Mhm.
Right? What is the in theory, what is the best we could possibly do in terms of time complexity? Right?
Mhm.
Could we get, like, for example, in this case, could we ever know the answer to this problem with with without having to go through the array at least once? No. So we could never have constant
Yeah.
time complexity, and you'd be
Mhm.
able to explain that.
Yeah.
And then you might get some follow-up questions on that, and then depending on the time, we might say let's do another problem, right? I know Google, they might do like a Google type interview might do that.
Yeah.
Um, Depending on the type of company and how long the interview is, they might ask you two questions and they might say, okay, now you did this. I think I like your solution. Let's move on.
Yeah.
Okay, now threesome. Let's say you had three numbers that you needed to add to, let's say, zero. How could
Yeah.
you refactor your code to work with that?
Mm.
And then you go through that, you're talking through it, the same process. And then after, I'm like, oh, you got it, Chidi, let's hire you as a software engineer. We want to pay you this amount. And that's how it goes. So yeah, that's how I would kind of go about it with the mock technical interview. And how I think if you maybe use those approaches in a real technical interview, you'd have a lot of success.
Awesome. I'm definitely gonna do that then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, So yeah, do you have any more questions that I can help you with?
I feel like you were very thorough, and this is exactly what I needed, like more targeted, uh, like help with like what I'm already doing and what I could be doing.
Hmm.
You know, because you do read a lot of like stuff on the internet and like, or you could watch a YouTube video about how someone else did it. But I wanted to kind of bounce off like ideas based on what I'm already doing.
Hmm.
Which is I think is okay process for now, but like definitely could be better, and I could feel more confident doing it more consistently.
Hmm.
So I think we did a great job, and I think you did a great job explaining everything.
Thank you. Yeah. So
bring back our gas, yo. Bring back our gas, yo. Ẹ bá wa gbọ́mọ jáde o. Ẹ bá wa gbọ́mọ jáde o.